Live. Hey, hello, everyone. We are finally live. If you came on time and we were a little late, I totally apologize. We had some technical difficulties to take care of, but we are here. So I want to go ahead and jump right into today's conversation. Today's conversation is about video job interviews or online video and how it's impacting the hiring and recruitment industry. The video job interview, if you haven't experienced one yet, I suspect you just may, and I'd say in the next couple of years, if not even sooner, because they are indeed on the rise now. So that said, today I have an individual with me. His name is Chris Young, and Chris works for, I want to say it right, it's RIVS, RIVS, right? RIVS.
That's right.
Okay. It's called RIVS, RIVS Digital Interviewing. It's a platform. It's an actual company. And what the company does is they supply this kind of service to businesses who want to do video interviews. So Chris, go ahead and talk to the people.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Young with RIVS, and I got started at RIVS through another company that I had actually founded, a video interviewing company about now, 5.5 years ago. That was called Async Interview. And Async Interview provided virtual interviewing technology to employers to help screen candidates over the web. And then we were acquired by RIVS back in August of last year. And RIVS, as Alice mentioned, RIVS provides video interviewing technology to a variety of different employers in a variety of different industries. And I know the initial question is Skype, and we'll kind of jump into how it's different than Skype and the different technologies that actually encompass what we say is video interviewing, because there are multiple different types of technologies.
Okay. Now I want to kind of set the backdrop here.
Sure.
What do you think has created this growing trend, if you want to call it, and in using online video with recruiting and job hiring?
Sure. I think it was generally the convergence of two major trends. One, we saw rising gas prices, which leads to rising travel costs for organizations flying candidates in or bringing candidates in, which caused them to rethink the recruiting process for many ways, which is one, they want to make sure they're bringing in the right candidate for that final job interview. And how do they do that? By adding additional steps or better screening up front, so they could be more selective about who they're bringing in. And then we also saw the shrinking of budgets in general from HR. Generally, HR is kind of seen as a cost center, per se. And so with them having to, with the job downfalls back in 2008, a lot of recruiters were laid off because the companies weren't doing as much hiring, and they had to kind of bootstrap a little bit better, the recruiters did. And now as we're starting to see hiring really increase quite a bit, they're being asked, recruiters are generally being asked to do the same that they were when they had low hiring volumes now, but the hiring volumes have climbed quite a bit. So we're seeing the convergence of those two trends leading to having recruiting departments get more innovative and frankly, more creative with the way that they recruit. Finally, the last piece of it is video technology is just getting a heck of a lot better with capabilities. I remember when we first started async 5 years ago, what came becoming standard in computers, let alone being available in mobile devices. Now, I'd challenge you to go find a computer that does not have a webcam built into it. So.
Okay, here's what's funny that you say that. A couple of weeks ago, I was on a panel discussion about technology and jobs in technology, and one of the attendees, because I attended it virtually via Zoom, I think.
Okay. Zoom. Yep.
Zoom. And one of the attendees, she emailed me just maybe a day or so later, and she says, great presentation and everything, but I'm having to do a video interview. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right, cool. Much success to you.
Sure.
And she was like, well, since you seem to be, somewhat knowledgeable of these technologies, I I don't have what I need. Could you give me some advice on what I need to do this video interview? Now, mind you, it's 2016 and she did
Sure.
not have a computer with a webcam.
Okay.
That's one. And then two, she said that she didn't have a phone that she thought would allow her to click whatever link was in her email from this company and
Okay.
access the platform that they were using. So
Mhm.
one of the main reasons that I'm doing this interview with you, or this discussion with you, is because I think there are more people like her than we really realize
Sure.
who,
Sure.
who are probably going to get an invitation to do a video interview.
Mhm.
They'll be like, well, I'm so accustomed to having to do the face to face, and not to mention the technology wise,
Mhm.
I'm just not there yet. So
Sure.
from
Sure.
a technology standpoint, you already mentioned mobile, but I would also dare say, what do you think about social media as a whole kind of prompting this trend in online job interviewing? Yay or nay?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly kind of propelling it forward. But I think what you just stated as a problem certainly does exist. I mean, there are people that run into scenarios where they don't have a smartphone and they don't have a computer with a webcam because their computer is quite outdated. Those tend to fall in specific niches of job categories, and that's perfectly okay. We have the ability to ship candidates webcams that don't have them. So providing that kind of peace of mind to the employer that they could do it if we needed to. But that's very, very rare, and there's many alternatives, like just using a voice interview or things like that. But I think there is one thing that stuck out to me that you mentioned, which is that they're so used to doing the face-to-face. And I think it's the biggest misconception with video interviewing is, well, is it taking away my ability to interview face-to-face with the employer? And the answer is generally no. It's typically taking place of the phone interview. So where you're typically not seeing a recruiter anyway, or even really speaking with somebody in that department, it's replacing that first step in the process. We're actually trying to help you get to that face-to-face interview much faster. Generally, our clients can do that 2 weeks faster than they typically would with the traditional process. And that's because simply the asynchronous nature of this technology allows candidates to interview whenever and wherever they want, which means they're going to do it faster, which means the recruiter can screen all of the candidates faster and then ultimately make the invite to you as a candidate earlier than they normally would. And that's kind of one of the big misconceptions with video interviewing is that, again, it's not really replacing the face, it's generally replacing the phone interview.
Okay. So here's another element of it that I'm wondering.
Mm-hmm.
When you start thinking about video interview, are there different types of video interviews? And what I mean
Yeah.
by that is what we're doing now technically is an interview, technically. And we're using Google Hangout. But are there different types of platforms? Are there different kinds of wherein, yes, we could use something that like we're using today. And then you also have platforms that I would imagine maybe can be preloaded with questions, and it's just you and a webcam and you answer the questions. And are
Yeah.
there platforms that would allow a physical person to be in a little window and they'll be talking to you as if they were, talking to
Sure.
you?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the biggest misconception is that video interviewing, when we say that term, people think, well, Skype, that's been around for ages. Why do you guys exist? Or why do all the companies exist? And Google Hangouts and Skype are fantastic tools. I have nothing against them. Quality is a little bit lower than some of the more professional platforms, and that's expected. It's free. And so you're kind of getting what you pay for. We are conducting what we call a live video interview per se. There are really two types of virtual interviews or video interviewing solutions. One is what we call a live video interview. You and I scheduled this time, sat down, we're both speaking live over the internet. The only thing that separates us is your location from mine, and that's the live video interview. There are hundreds of platforms out there that offer free capabilities to do this. We're using Google Hangouts, that's one of them. And it's a fantastic tool for those companies that just have a one-off live video interview. Here and there, they have one, they want to just kind of jump in and do it, that's great. Those companies that are doing what I say 5 or more a week, then you start to care a little bit more about the candidate experience, the quality. scheduling capabilities that some of these free platforms don't have. And that's really where an interviewing specific provider comes in. We can have multiple managers interviewing the candidate live over the web. Each manager can actually fill out their own evaluation rubric while we're sitting here talking. That then gets uploaded and passed directly back to the recruiter, so it's all done in real time. So this is the live video interviewing technology, and most candidates will be asked to do a live video interview. If they are asked, they will be asked to do a live video interview probably right before they're asked to come on site. And the rationale behind that is they just want to do a quick verification and get everybody's thumbs up approval to bring you in as a candidate. Because again, companies are putting anywhere from, let's say, $1,000 to $2,000 into your expenses to come on site, especially if you're traveling. And that's very important when you start talking about manager and above levels, where the live video interview becomes handy. The second major technology, and the one that I think is really sparking the majority of the growth in the interviewing space, is what we call pre-recorded one-way interviews. And that is where the employer would send the candidate a link, and you would receive it in your email, click on the link, and you would then be prompted with a handful of questions that the employer had pre-set up. So I would come in at, whether it's 2 a.m. in the morning on a Thursday because I finished work and I need to kind of interview without my employer knowing it, or I had some free time on a Sunday afternoon, I can do this at my leisure. And when I click on the link, I'm going to be fed a number of questions that the employer set up. I could see the recruiter asking me the question, but it's not live. And then I'll record my response to that question. Usually employers have 5 or 6 questions. It's a very simple, fast process. Most candidates do this in about 10, 15 minutes at most. Okay. And the neat thing about it is, again, this pre-recorded one-way interview takes the place of that phone interview that the recruiter is doing. So if the recruiter has, on average, they say 20 requisitions, but most recruiters I talk to have 40, and you spend about a half an hour per phone screen, then a recruiter can really only do 16 phone screens a day. With the pre-recorded video interviewing, you could do 200 interviews in a day because candidates can do them at their leisure. And then a recruiter could quickly screen through those video responses. And then the nice thing about it from a candidate perspective is your video responses allow you to speak up for your resume. So your resume is just kind of a hard coached way of saying, hey, I passed the basic test. But what better way to show your personality than recording yourself answering a handful of questions that then can be seen by the recruiter and even passed along to the manager. So that way you're coming on site for a face-to-face interview is more probable given your personality fit with the company.
Okay.
So long-winded answer is there are really 2 types of technologies, the live, which is very similar to what we're doing, and what people tend to think about, but there's also this pre-recorded one-way interview, which is becoming much, much more common.
Mm-hmm. So basically, this is not a replacement per se of the still coming to the office, sit down and meet with whoever you're going to work with. This is a complement. This is just one step.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, this would be a replacement to that phone screen where it feels like a recruiter is asking you standardized questions and you're just responding. You tend to have to repeat yourself. It's typically replacing that step. So once you apply, you get an invitation, you record your video responses. After the video responses, you're contacted typically by an employer to set up that face-to-face interview. So by no means does this replace a face-to-face interview, and it should never, ever replace one. It should just help you get there a lot faster.
Okay. So what kinds of industry, is there one industry that's better suited for this than other industries, or basically across any industry technically?
We always say it's anywhere from let's say college recruiting is obviously very big, or was very big because the millennial generation was pretty keen on doing this. I mean, it's something that grew up as part of their daily lives, so it made a lot of sense for that. But I think as people realize all the benefits of being able to interview so much faster and hire candidates faster, it's being adopted by a large number of industries across the board. I know personally healthcare and retail tend to be very, very big on the pre-recorded technology. I think it's across the board in terms of the live video interviewing technology, because that's really dependent on the recruiting process around it. But I would say healthcare, retail, manufacturing tends to be big as well, just because, again, a little bit higher volumes there. So the pre-recorded is good for high volume. Live video interviewing is good for kind of doing your checks and balances, so to speak, before the face-to-face interview.
Okay. All right. Well, the beautiful part about that is you can't say, well, it's only best suited for this industry or that industry.
Yeah, there are two industries where the video interviewing, the video aspect of it may not fit as well. I'll give you two examples. So manufacturing in, let's say, a warehouse and a call center, right? We may not care as much about the video aspect, but we like the ability to have that pre-recorded interview where I can send out invitations to 100 candidates, they can record themselves. And so we have the ability to actually create the same thing, but it's just an audio interview. So when I get my invitation, I can just dial 1-800 and then punch in my PIN code, and I'm asked the questions via the phone. So that's great for a call center because you can test out how they're responding to certain questions. It's the same concept as video, but video is not necessary in those scenarios. So it is applicable to all industries. Whether you use audio or video is dependent on kind of what the needs are for screening the candidates.
So we talked a little bit about some of the benefits as far as saving money on travel and time. Mm-hmm. Are there other kind of long-term benefits to using online video interviews?
There are two major ones. One is that for larger organizations or as companies become larger, it's very helpful to have a standard process. And if you can imagine, you may have a team of 4 or 5, maybe even 20 or 30 recruiters, and everyone's naturally, it's just part of our human behavior to kind of tweak a little process here or there. It may give potentially an unfair advantage or tweak the process so it's a little hard to standardize. Video interviewing is very standard in the way that it's adopted, and it allows every candidate kind of that same fair chance to perform and show their experiences and skills, and that's a real big benefit from the employer's perspective. It also kind of creates that uniformity that they need from a reporting perspective. The second big benefit long-term is a big trend that's popping up is trying to get ahead of the recruiting game. So organizations will go out and build talent pools of people that are in nursing, for example, that are ready to make a move, but maybe we don't have a vacancy right now. So let's go build relationships with those folks, get them ready, and as far down the recruiting process as we can. So when that vacancy opens up, we may only have a week or two to hire, or to actually from the interviewing to the hiring. And so what companies have done is you may have one candidate who interviewed through the video interview platform and got the job, but your second candidate in line there was a great fit. You just don't have a vacancy for him or her. Video interviewing allows you, because they're all stored and saved by the providers, you can actually ping those second candidates for positions that open up a month or two from now and say, hey, look, you've already done this video interview. We'd like to bring you directly on site. So you've got a database of these completed video interviews that you can leverage.
That said, well, how long do those interviews stay on the server? I mean, is there any rule and regulation to say, well, they're only going to be here a year, or is it a matter of the more you get, eventually you're going to have to erase some of them to create more space, just like with anything?
Sure. There's two real drivers, and it's really dependent on the provider. RIVS typically does between 2 or 3 years of storage. Frankly, after 2 or 3 years, you probably want to have the candidate do the video interviews again because their skills have really evolved quite a bit over time. There's also regulations around EEOC and OFCCP that require those interviews saved. Most companies, it's a year, but 2 years is plenty. So those regulations also provide constraints, but that's just something that's provider specific. So you just have to discuss with the provider how long those are saved, stored. If you stop using them, can you download those so you have them for your records as well?
That goes into my next question. Are there any set rules and regulations regarding using this type of platform? Any legal, I mean, not legal, but any federal or state, anything of that nature that companies have to be aware of when using online video interviews?
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than any platform, right? So there are rules and regulations around interviewing as a whole and hiring, right? The EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and OFCP provide those regulations. If the company abides by them, it depends on if they're an EEOC provider, which the majority are. So those companies still have to follow those rules and regulations. Where video interviewing comes into that is it's really just seen as another communication mechanism, much like the telephone, right? So most of the concerns around video interviewing are is it more discriminatory, excuse me, than other technologies, or is there something wrong with it because I get to see the candidate? And the rationale there is, if you're going to discriminate, it's not really because of the platform. It's really because of lack of training and lack of best practices. I can discriminate on somebody's resume based on their name. I could discriminate based on somebody's voice on the phone, and then certainly face-to-face as I'm seeing them. So there are plenty of opportunities to discriminate that are indifferent of the platform. And that's really the key with video interviewing, is that it's really just another mechanism. It's not necessarily creating any advantage to or additional bias that isn't already existing in the interview process. But the organizations just need to be focused on maintaining their current EEOC, OFCC best practices through the use of video interviewing, phone interviewing, whatever else it might be.
Now, from the interviewees side, what do you have any tips or kinds of guides to say, well, look, this is if you are indeed asked to do this type of interview, do you have some tips to give them?
Sure,
and it's still an
absolutely.
It's still an interview, so you still want
that, and you hit home to the number one point, which is this is an interview, so treat it just like you would an actual interview. If you would show up to an interview in a button-down green shirt like this to the employer's office, then great, wear the same thing. If you would wear a suit, wear a suit. If the company, we don't make recommendations to the candidates on what to dress up or wear, because some companies don't want the candidates in a suit, others do. So again, the key is kind of focus on treating this as if it was any other interview, dress to impress, dress how you would there. And then there's some other tips that maybe are more unique to the video interviewing. And I published an article in US News and World Report that was my 10 top tips for candidates participating in a video interview. And you can certainly share that afterwards as well. But two big highlights from that would be one is the computer, right? So if you're using a computer versus a mobile device, if you have webcam or cameras on both, I always recommend a computer. It's a little bit easier. I don't have to touch anything or hold a phone up. And then the other thing with the computer is I have my computer, whenever I'm on video, I have my computer propped up so it looks down. Nobody likes the bottom of the chin when you're looking up. So I have my computer propped up looking down on me a little bit. And then finally is around lighting. So you don't have to be a professional videographer to do this or anything, but generally the rule of thumb is make sure the lighting is always in front of you. If you have the lighting behind you, you just end up being a silhouette on camera. It's just not as attractive from a video perspective. So all of my light sources are right in front of me, and that way it kind of creates a good lighting system. Other tips were very much similar to the average interview process, but the big unique ones I think are using a desktop or laptop, propping it up so you're looking down, and then having lighting in front of you. And obviously one of the fun things that we always learn is make sure that everybody in your apartment, house, place knows that you're interviewing, and that includes your pets. So just making sure your dogs are put in another room, your cats like laptop computers, so jump on them. Just making sure that everybody is kind of aware that you're in an interview environment.
Okay. So what would you say is the future of things regarding online video interviews? Where do you see this going in another 5 years or so?
Sure. Well, I mean, actually, I think it's going to become the new standard. I know when interviewing used to take place, when you could go into airports, they would fly a candidate into the airport. You would conduct the interview in the airport, and the candidate would jump on a plane and fly right back. And that was before phone interviews existed. And when phone interviews came out, they were kind of seen as very impersonal interviews. And that's kind of slowly adopted to now we think of the phone interview as the new standard. And I think the pre-recorded video interviews are going to be the new standard that replace phone interviews. Mm-hmm. And live video interviews will become potentially a step recorded video interview and the face-to-face interview just to justify the cost of bringing the candidates in. So I think the biggest thing we're going to see is just obviously much more adoption around the technology, so it becomes standard. I think the next big thing that we're going to start to see, or could potentially see, is the evolution of the resume to becoming more of a dynamic resume. So you'll see a bunch of stories that pop up of web designers that are kind of creating these dynamic resumes, or potentially LinkedIn even adding the ability to have like a video resume or a couple of videos introducing the candidates. I think there's potential for that. That hasn't really occurred yet because there's still some concerns around video resumes and discrimination. So I think with further clarification, that'll evolve over time. But I do think that the adoption of video interviewing is going to become the new standard of the pre-screening interviews.
Well, wonderful. I thank you for taking some time out of your schedule today to enlighten people about, I would dare say this is it's a growing trend right now, but I would dare say give it another 2 years, and like you said, maybe not even 5 years out, it will become a standard. And I suspect in certain industries it is already the standard.
Sure. Yeah, and I would say if you're interviewing now and you're job searching, it's highly likely you're going to be asked to do one of these. It may not be through a interviewing specific provider. There's still plenty of companies that use a Skype or a Google Hangouts. And like I said from the beginning, that's perfectly fine. They will eventually evolve to wanting a interviewing specific provider like RIVS, or but the Google Hangouts and Skype are a perfectly good start.
So for people that want to use the services that you and your company provide, of course, they can go to RIVS. Is it RIVS? It's RIVS.com, isn't it?
RIVS.com, and you can just /demo to take a demo of the technology, see what it's all about and how it might be able to tie into the recruiting process that you have.
Okay. And if they wanted to talk more with you as the marketing, are you the VP of marketing?
That's correct.
Okay. So if they want to get in contact with you, are you accessible?
I am. So can certainly reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, or you can email me at cyoung, that's YOUNG, @rivs.com.
Okay. Well, thank you so very much again for taking some time out of your busy schedule. And despite the little technical difficulties, we were able to get it done. So again, have a great day. And if anyone wants any more information, remember, you can just go to RIVS.com. And RIVS is also they have their own LinkedIn page. So if you want to get more information there, you can go to the website, go to the page. You're on Twitter. Yeah, you're everywhere.
As well. Yep.
You're everywhere you expect a digital company. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. So thank you, everybody, especially for you who are watching the rebroadcast. Thank you. And if you have any questions, please put them below, and I'll be sure to put that link to that article once you email it to me in the description of the video. So sure. As we say in the world of entertainment and video, that's a wrap. Have a good day.